Hello, I'm here to talk to you about the topic of leadership development. This is a topic that is on the minds of executives around the world. It's made a strategic priority in many organizations today. It's on the minds of human resource professionals as they try to figure out the type of leadership talent that they need in order to move their organizations into the future. It's on the minds of scholars like myself. My name is Lisa Dragoni. I'm an associate professor in the School of Business at Wake Forest University. My colleague Dave Day, who's a chaired professor at the University of Western Australia, and I were asked to write an article which appeared earlier this year in the annual review of organizational psychology and organizational behavior. So in this article, we talk about a lot of different things revolving around leadership development. I'm going to talk with you about some of the high-level findings from the literature with respect to leadership development. Leadership development is distinct from leader development, and we make this distinction in the article. Leader development is really to try and what are the things that help prepare individuals to assume formal leadership positions within organizations. This part of the article really talks about leadership development. So what are the things that we know from research about how collectives, teams and organizations and units can create direction, clarity of direction, alignment of mindsets and effort, and higher levels of motivation and commitment towards those directions. So the research I'm going to overview very briefly here is at two levels. First, the team or unit level, and the second is at the organizational level. And I've prioritized those things that have a theoretical basis, but also an empirical basis. So there's some validity to the theory. So the first is with respect to teams. So how do teams generate greater clarity of direction, alignment of effort, and also commitment? And what we find is that in that research, there have been a couple of thought leaders in this area. Scott DeRue at the University of Michigan and his colleagues in particular have talked about what are the conditions necessary for leadership, for teams to develop more of a shared leadership model within their unit. In other words, we know that with leadership we have to have followership. So if I'm leading a team, others need to be following. And if my colleague is leading, then we all need to be following. And the extent to which that is shared, that leadership function and followership function is shared within the team, that's what this research is about. And so what we learn is that basically there are three conditions that help the development of this type of shared leadership. The first is that there is an interpersonal comfort that develops among the members. They trust one another, they're viewed as warm and caring individuals, and this allows then for a sharing of influence and expertise. The second is knowledge of what do people in the team know, what their expertise is. And the last then is this notion of we have a shared mindset, both in terms of our goals and our purposes, but also in terms of the extent to which we value sharing influence and leadership. So when those three conditions are present, this work is showing that leadership development within teams tends to be present and is growing. The second area of research is really at the organizational level. And here the research is really focused on how do organizations develop leadership. And leadership is more seen as a process by which organizations can then manage the environmental uncertainty that might be present. So Deborah Ancona, who's at MIT, and her colleagues, and Mary Oldbean, who's at TCU, and her colleagues, they independently have been doing research, but there's some commonality across them. And the commonality tends to be this: that they find that leadership is growing in these organizations. In other words, there's greater clarity of direction, effort, and motivation when there are pockets of the organization in which there's informal leaders, and there's a negotiation process then that occurs with those that are occupying formal leadership positions. And their work is then about that process by which there's this negotiation, and then how does clarity of direction, alignment, and commitment get fostered as a result. So the work that I've shared here is really at its infancy. It is not work that has been out for a long time. Some of it is, in fact, still in press. So there's a lot of work to be done still in this area. But this will give you a sense of the beginning stages of what we see with regard to leadership development.